Thank you so much. Thank you, Dario, for the invite. And thank you very much, Veronica, and the rest of the people there for inspiring me, as one of them said before. I presented a title that is, Can Recent History Count as a Defining Intersectionality Dimension? And a subtitle that calls for reflections from the Global South. I believe that titles are promises. So I want to tell you how I intend to fulfill those promises. I'm going to try and make 2 invites. I'm going to divide the presentation into 2 parts. First, I want to tell you who we are down here right now. That has to do with the thing of the Global South. This is the representation that we still hold about the world and our place in the world. Marta Plata is here, where you can see the tip of the arrow, and Edinburgh would be somewhere here. We still believe we are down here, and there are many questions regarding intersectionality that are still worrying or concerning us. We're working on many things, but the truth is that gender, race, geopolitics, class, and language are things we can deal with because we have already seen that they are the source of certain othering. So we can work on that. So today I'm going to speak of something different. But before I do that, I thought it was essential to position myself. And then I will talk about recent history as an intersectionality dimension. But I also wanted to say a little bit about who we are in terms of who we follow, what lines we are following, because everything I will be saying today is credited to some of the people that are listed below. We are engaged in critical studies, what we call criticalities. So social justice pedagogy is something we take on in our studies, but we're also interested and under the track of the decolonial turn, which is a sort of refurbishing of post-colonial and cultural studies, but for Latin America and the Caribbean. We are also involved with queer theories and recently have engaged in post-humanisms, neo-materialisms, and neo-vitalisms. And that has a lot to do with what I'm going to present to you today. And in regards to research, we are actually trying to cope with the challenges of autoethnography as a gesture, that is as a way of approaching research, but also as a method in the different variants that we are finding. So the 2 promises in the title, who we are down here, a few things that you have to know about us so that you can understand the proposal and the target and the orientation of the talk. And then why is it that we think that recent history is an intersectionality dimension? This is what we believe about education right now. And I'm going to refer to teacher education in general and not to language teacher education in particular, because in the community where I work, there are some English professors, and English is a foreign language here in Argentina. But our research is not primarily directed to language teacher education, but teacher education in general. All the same, I think you might find it applicable or interesting for your own research. When we think of education down here, education means not what happens at schools or in institutions, but mostly what happens in social life. So we are all the time paying attention to the de-education or the re-education that we experience when we watch movies, when we follow social media, when we see advertisements, commercials on TV, or just have dinner with our families at home. We are especially interested in that kind of education and what we are all the time relearning or unlearning in every social interaction. Teacher education then for us is more concerned with what happens in social life, in daily life, than what we try to teach and learn in the institutions where teachers are educated. We give a lot of importance to reiteration, that is to the things that are either repeated, replicated, or changed every time we engage in social interaction. We believe that things that are all the time reiterated or all the time repeated or replicated are the ones that end up becoming true for us. The truth has to do with habit, as Sarah Ahmed would say. We believe that change is possible, but only in a minor scale. Today, before you were asking a lot of questions to Veronica on how is it that we can change something that needs to be changing. And the answer here would be one step at a time, a little minor gesture from each one of us that all of a sudden paints a big picture differently. Sarah Med also refers to that as a well-trodden path. She says that if you take a step in a different direction and then many other people have taken steps in the same direction, in the end, what you have is a different reality. So that is also the way in which we work where we are. And finally, and this is from queer theory in particular, everything, absolutely everything is personal. Why recent history as an intersectionality dimension? I'm going to mention 2 or 3 events that have taken place in the places where we live. One of these is el estallido in Chile. I don't know if you have heard about this. It was a social protest that took place a few years ago that is still vibrating as a resonance in Chile. I was there last year, and this was a common conversation with my colleagues. I also chose to talk about student university occupation in Colombia because I have colleagues that are actually paying attention to that student movement. And to mothers of Plaza de Mayo in Argentina, I don't know if you are acquainted with that social movement. These people are women that lost their sons and daughters to during the dictatorship that took place in Argentina between 1976 and 1983, where there were a lot of missing people, many of which were tortured, of whom were tortured before assassinated. Some of them remain still today missing. The point is that in this global south where I live, intersectionality, the dimensions of intersectionality that are most decisive in framing identity, the most crucial dimension nowadays has to do with how is it that you position yourself in regard to these social events, to these social protests. How you feel about them is what defines what kind of teacher and what kind of person you are in the world in which we live in the global south. This has made us divide ourselves into either we or they. And as I said before, gender, race, the geopolitical positioning that we have because we belong to the global south, language, class, are not as powerful as recent history because they have already been worked on, because we already know how is it that we need to proceed to dismantling this kind of intersectionality dimensions. But this other dimension, that is, how is it that we stand in the face of social protest, is actually dividing us into 2 parts and is totally defining as to who we are or who we want to be. How does this affect teacher education? Which are the perspectives on teacher education? I'm going to describe that as we and they. We believe that ideology is necessary. The word necessary here doesn't mean that we have to be ideological, but that there is no other choice. That ideology is a must because either you are ideological by being explicit about your positioning or by trying to conceal it. But we believe that ideology is always there and that ethics is a way to begin any class. Even if we are teaching the present perfect, what we need to consider first is the ethics that we are mobilizing when teaching then the present perfect, when correcting specific language mistake. Ethic goes first. and then all the other concerns that we have about educational programs and curricula. Everything is personal. We make it personal. We take it personal. And our aim is disputing inequities. That is where we are. That is what is important for us. That is what matters to us. What about they? The other people that are in teacher education, because they are either educators or pre-service teachers. They believe that teaching doesn't need to be political, and they agree with this idea that if you're political, you're indoctrinating. And so that is something bad, something that has to be avoided. They think that methodologies and technical matters are more important than political or ethical questions. That it's better to abstract everything and generalize, not to talk specifically about anyone or any place or any circumstance, but to talk in general about language and culture and imperialism without being too specific or taking this down to a specific situation that might involve some of the people in the class. And the main aim is at developing certain skills, especially skills that will become useful professionally. What is it that has happened to us in these recent years? We have become underprivileged. The word become is very important here because we didn't know what underprivileged meant before. Because in the last 15 years, before in the years, this administration, and you were talking about institutional resistance before. In the case of my context where I live and work, the resistance is not institutionalized, but it's personal. People resist. They are people that resist any kind of political involvement in teacher education, for example. Institutionalization had made us privileged. The positioning that we had was the official positioning. Now we have become underprivileged, and these are the people, they have become mainstream. So which have been the implications of this? First, we have learned a few lessons on privilege. Now that we are underprivileged, we have learned that privilege is blind, insensitive, and loud. We have also learned something about underprivilege. It hurts. It silences and banishes us from any possible discussion. We are not considered equals to engage in any kind of discussion. We are discarded before because we are indoctrinating, because we are political, and so we are dirty, and we are taking everything to a very personal arena where things shouldn't be taken anymore. We have become unofficial. We are learning that the teaching that matters is becoming impossible. And this has to do with the next point. The difference is becoming radical. Our students and other fellow teachers, other fellow educators are they. And between we and them, there is no way of coming to terms because our stances are so radically different that we don't see one another. We cannot see the other person's perspective and integrate that into ours. And still we know that whatever happens in the country, whatever happens in teacher education, and whatever happens in the world, as Donna Haraway says, is a matter of a common shared fate. We also know that frontiers, cuts, divisions are habits, and we know that this may change, that the current situation may change because everything changes all the time, and it's all dependent upon the non-repetition or the divergent repetitions of what we have now. And so we can conclude that we really don't know, and we have to take risks. Why really in italics? Because in Argentina, there is a saying that goes, no la ven, meaning you cannot understand. That is what people that have become now privileged say about the people that we are, that were once privileged and now underprivileged. They tell us, you don't understand. And I think that the first thing that we need to acknowledge down here is that we really don't understand. Because that place of ignorance might bring news, because everything we knew actually has proven that it was not exactly like that. And then we have to take certain risks. So I'm going to provide a very simple example, and with this I'm going to finish the presentation, because I'm more interested in what you might tell me to enlighten us, or we can produce together. This is a picture. This is me here. This is my brother and the rest of my family, and this is my aunt. She is a Madre de Plaza de Mayo. That means she has a missing child. He disappeared. He was abducted. He was taken in captivity when he was 19. His name was Roque Almiron. We never knew what happened to him. We believe that probably he was dumped from a plane alive into the ocean, because that is the case of the people that have never been found. We haven't been able to bury him or his remains, and we don't know anything about him. We know that he was 19 when he was taken away, and he studied medicine, and he worked in a slum, and he prepared tea and lunch for children that were also underprivileged in other terms, in the terms of social class. Last year, I took this picture and I posted that in my Instagram account. And I did this as a way of taking a stand. I am a teacher education, and I have a lot of followers on Instagram that are students, doctoral students, postdoctoral students. And I decided that if this defined me, if the way in which I take life and education politically, ethically defines me, then I had to make a small move to show that this was personal. A very tiny movement to keep the conversation alive, the conversation between us and them alive, and also to keep my seat at the table. This is me. This is my email, and this is the place where I work, the School of Humanities, Universidad Nacional de Mar del Plata. I'm saying this because I don't know if I have been successful in sharing everything I wanted to share today.